Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome you to a new episode of the Digital series. In this episode, I will be going over another theory, one that I will title the Darkin theory. So please don't forget to throw in a like if you end up enjoying this video. And with that being said, let us dive straight into the topic. So the first thing to cover is the basis of Darkin. What exactly is it? Well, for those of you that remember from my Aatrox Did You Know, it is an ancient race that is of course given the name Darkin, and that only 5 Darkins remain in the world. And one of those 5 is Aatrox, the only one that we so far know exists. Now the main question is, are the remaining 4 Darkins people or things that we have absolutely no idea of? Or are they some of the champions that we play almost every single day in Summoner's Rift? Champions that are Darkin that we simply just don't know about yet. And in this video, I will be proposing to you guys several champions that have the potential to qualify as a Darkin. Keep in mind, this is all just a theory. All of this could be true, none of this could be true, or some of this could be true. But it is mainly just food for thought. And as usual, I will be referencing a Reddit thread made by the user named Tedster. And I will link the Reddit thread in the description of this video if you want to have a read for yourself. But let's get straight into the theory. I will be going over 5 different champions that have the potential to qualify as a Darkin. So remember, there are only 4 Darkins remain, and I'm talking about 5 champions. So obviously at least one, if not all of these champions are not actually Darkin. But the 5 champions I will be mentioning in this video are Jax, Varus, Brand, Nautilus, Tryndamere. And after you finish watching the video and seen all the points and facts, write in the comments below underneath the video if you think any of these champions may actually be a Darkin. So let's first start things off with Varus. Taking a look at Varus' lore, it states how Varus had to protect something called the Pit of Pallas that is within the Ionian Temple. And this pit contained an evil corruption. However, after defending the pit from the Noxian invaders, he found out his hometown has been completely ravaged, and from this he threw himself into the Pit of Pallas, and Varus emerged what he is now. A corrupted Varus with a bloodlust like no other for the Noxian invaders. Which does somewhat resemble Aatrox's lore, since it always states that Aatrox has also a thirst for blood, especially with his sword. But the next point is the fact that Aatrox's sword is considered a living weapon. But if you take a look at the League judgment for Varus, it also states within that his bow is considered a living thing, which may imply that the remaining 4 Darkins that we do not know anything about are not actual living beings, but perhaps they are some sort of corrupted spirit, such that were trapped within the Pit of Pallas, since there is some sort of corruption within, and the Darkin within the pit invaded Varus' mind, corrupting him to what he is now. So those are the facts that might argue that Varus is potentially now a Darkin, due to one of the 4 spirit Darkins that remain invading his mind. And with that being said, let's go to the next champion, which is gonna be Brand. This one is gonna be following in suit to Varus how a spirit invaded his mind, because the same thing potentially happened to Brand. To better understand the situation, let's go into his lore as well. It states that the human version of Brand named Keegan ventured into a cave across a frozen wasteland, presumably Freljord, and that the cave was covered in runes of which they had no understanding of. The first thing that can be pointed out is the fact that these runes could be in the Darkin language, and as they ventured further into the cave, they saw a dancing column of flame, something that should be physically impossible, given the surrounding area. And Keegan could not stop himself from just walking forward with his hand out towards the flame. Now doesn't this seem a little similar to how Varus got possessed supposedly by a Darkin? Since he himself walked into the Pit of Pallas, which is the Pit of Black Fire. And it also states in Brand's lore that the thing that now possesses him is a creature of olden times, perhaps even a casualty of the Rune Wars. And also that it is known in ancient texts, keyword ancient, which is exactly what the Darkin race is, as the Burning Vengeance. After being possessed by this thing, he became what he is now, Brand. And on top of this, he also gained an enormous bloodlust to lay waste to the world of men and Yordles. This once again is very similar to Varus, because after Varus' transformation by what we are assuming is a Darkin, he also gained an enormous bloodlust for something, and both of them were consumed and transformed by fire. So these are the points that might prove that Brand is a Darkin, or at least possessed by one. But next, let us go into Jax. This one is going to be a little different compared to Varus and Brand. And in order to properly understand this one, we will have to look at Aatrox's lore for a bit first. It states how he helped in the fight between the Protectorates and the Mage Lords, both being ancient races. But the first theory is the fact that Jax might be a Mage Lord, since his W and his ultimate are all magic type abilities. On top of this, the Mage Lord race is extremely ancient, and there's no other champion in the league that we know of that looks anything like Jax, having 3 fingers and presumably 6 glowing eyes. But going back to Aatrox's lore, it does mention how Aatrox helped the side of the Protector race to win the battle and wipe out all of the Mage Lords. But since Aatrox thrives on battle,
this battle will be my masterpiece.
And it wouldn't make much sense for him to completely help the Protector race and have them rule the world, all based off of that definitive win. So with that, there comes the theory that Aatrox may have saved a few Mage Lords or just one, but among those saved is Jax. And that Aatrox infused one of the 5 Darkin spirits into Jax in order to give him more power to try and take revenge on Aatrox for wiping out the Mage Lords. Since again, Aatrox thrives on battle. Another interesting thing is this flashwork right here, because if you look closely behind Jax's lamppost, you can see the shade of a figure of what looks to be Aatrox. And in Aatrox's lore, it is always mentioned how he appears in certain relics as a shadow. Or it could just be the actual spirit that is possessing Jax, being portrayed in an interesting fashion. Another thing to note is the fact that Jax's race is listed as unknown, which naturally can lead to many speculations, and that his league judgment was the fastest ever, and apparently he was put at the top of the list of candidates to receive a league judgment. Yet no one knows except for High Counselor Reginald Ashram, who is the former leader of the league. And the last thing to note is that Jax is also a very strong fighter, someone who's never lost fights, is always looking for the next strongest fighter, and was even restricted to only using a lamppost in the league, which is the first and only time such a restriction was applied to a champion. Which definitely gives more reason to him being part of the ancient race with a Darkin possessing him, thus having so much power. So that concludes the points made for Jax. The next one we will talk about is going to be Nautilus. The reasoning behind Nautilus becoming a Darkin is quite relatable to Varus and Bran. As it states in his lore, he was also just a regular human being, in this case a sailor. But once him and his crew came in contact with a black oily substance, which may be the same thing as the Pit of Palace from Varus's lore or very close to it, he got pulled into the water and he got changed into what he is now. Something that seems extremely dark. And after he got changed into what he is, he gained an enormous bloodlust for the sailors who abandoned him from his ship and let him be dragged into the water by the black oily substance. So just like Varus and Bran, he got changed from a human into a very dark being. And just like all the other champions mentioned, he also has a bloodlust. But before we end off this video, there's of course one champion left to talk about, Tryndamere. In Tryndamere's lore, he has somewhat of a special case, because he actually made direct contact with Aatrox. Due to the fact that when Tryndamere's village was getting overrun, it was only by simple raiders. However, soon after, our dark figure appeared, and this is of course Aatrox. And it mentions how Aatrox had a cruel living sword, and inspired an unhinged bloodlust in the invaders with his unearthly magic, which is quite literally what he did during the battle between the Mage Lords and the Protectorates. And from this it seems like Aatrox may have infused Tryndamere with the bloodlust or rage as well, especially considering he has a specific quote to Tryndamere.
Tryndamere, my greatest creation.
And assuming that the skins in this game are somewhat relatable to the lore, it could be that Demon Blade Tryndamere is perhaps the future version of Tryndamere, where he is more consumed by the darkened magic or rage, and became more and more dark, and Tryndamere's weapon being infused with his arm now being part of him, acting like a living weapon. So that is it for this video, guys. Those are all of the facts that I had to mention of all the 5 champions. Special thanks to the Reddit thread I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So now you guys tell me, which of these 5 do you think is the most believable? If I had to choose just one, I think Tryndamere seems to be the most believable one. But I want to hear from you guys as well. But with that being said, this is it for this video, guys. I really hope you have enjoyed it and maybe have learned something new. If you did enjoy the video, please don't forget to throw in a like and share with your friends. You can also follow me on my Facebook and my Twitter pages, both Redmercy LOL. And definitely don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't. But with all that being said, I hope you guys really did enjoy this video, and I hope to see you next time. Peace.